job. Some audio on the six. Hello, everyone. We're going to be streaming in about 2 minutes. We'll do a live stream here.
Testing 1 2 1 2. Testing 1 2. Okay, kill it. Dwayne, kill it. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to be streaming live in a few minutes. How it's going to go, we're going to run the intro for the Get-Go Forum. Then we're going to stand and then go straight into Lift Every Voice. We'll be on air at that time. Then I will come back up and do an introduction and the program starts. Okay? Everybody has that? Smile. Look natural. And we're going to have fun in an eventful and very informational period. Okay? Thank you. Rosalind? We're streaming from moriahcity.org, MORIAH city.org. Watch live, moriahcity.org. Okay, you ready? Javon, ready for the first Get-Go Forum? Audio. And 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, roll. Okay, can everyone please stand for Lift Every Voice and sing? Roll. Would you have your seats? Have your seats, please. Welcome to Mount Rise Get-Go Forum, God's Excellence to Get Organized. It's a series of forums designed to address essential issues that currently exist in the lives of our individuals and families in our communities and in the nation. This is the second year of our MLK Day service, collaboration with the Queens Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. I got to let out. And Chapter President Dr. Marie Durandis Presley, and Social Action Chairs Rosalind Spigner and Armenta Weeks. We also want to send out a hearty welcome to our Mount Moriah streaming faith audience at moriahcity.org. And now, I want to introduce to you a very special person. He's a Renaissance man, a worshiper, a believer, an entrepreneur, a builder, a worker, a dreamer, a healer, a man after God's own heart, the shepherd and senior pastor of our house, Reverend Robert Reese Lowe.
Good afternoon to all, and we're going to take this moment to invoke God's presence, because if we ever needed a God, we sure do need him now. Let us pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, you are the God of the universe. Not only the God of the universe, but you're the sovereign God who is in control of everything that takes place. We thank you that you are the God who dealt with the Samaritan woman in a time of bias. You are the God when women were second-class citizens. When you rose, you were given to give to the woman named Mary the first message of the gospel message. When Peter refused to take the gospel to the Gentiles, you gave him a vision not to call unclean what you call clean. And you are the God who's always dealt with the less fortunate, the downtrodden, and the disenfranchised. So we invoke your presence today in this country when it seems as if we're going backwards and not forwards. We pray for this gathering, this day, that it would be productive and that we leave this place inspired as those who have come before us, inspired to dream bigger, inspired to dream better, but inspired to do a work for our community and for this time. For this we ask in your precious name, Jesus, and let all the people of God say amen. And once again to Dr. Marie Durandis Presley and to the co-chairs Rosalind Spigner and Armenta Weeks and to the Social Action Committee and the entire Queens chapter of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority. We're all the Deltas. Come on, Deltas, let me hear you. I don't know what you do, but I know that's what you do. This is in conjunction with Moriah City family and our Get-Go Forum. We greet you on this Martin Luther King Day, and we're here today to be educated and discuss a very poignant subject, how hate crimes have risen in a Trump America. First of all, let me just say, we disavow Trump's recent hateful rhetoric. And I have to say recent because there's so many. It goes back so far, so we're just dealing with this, what he said about Haiti, the African countries, and that we have to discuss, and the hard thing is whether we have to discuss whether or not our president is a racist. We shouldn't even be having this discussion. But let me just bring us into what we're here to talk about today and view on the documentary. It's Hate Crimes in America. And I'm just going to give you a definition of what hate crimes are. A hate crime is a traditional offense like murder, arson, or vandalism with an added bias element. And for the purposes of collecting statistics, the FBI has defined hate crimes as a criminal offense against a person or property motivated in whole or in part by an offender's bias against race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, or gender identity. Hate in and of itself is not a crime. It's what you do with the hate. These efforts serve as a backdrop for investigations by state and local authorities, which handle the vast majority of hate crimes cases throughout the country. And there's a chart that's going to come up now to give you some statistics. Of the 6,121 criminal incidents reported, 6,063 of them were single bias incidents. There were also 58 multiple bias incidents. Of the single bias incidents, 57.5% were motivated by race, ethnicity, or ancestry bias. 21% were motivated by a religious bias. 17.7% were motivated by a sexual orientation bias. And the remaining incidents were motivated by gender identity, disability, or gender bias. So we come here today to have a very productive and provocative talk about hate crimes in America, in a Trump America. God bless you.
Good afternoon. My name is Rosalind Spigner, and I just want you to reach into your bags. You'll see a red folder. Everyone have. Inside of the folder will contain the program, bios of all of our panelists. Also, you will see an evaluation. So once we start the discussion, this is a working session as well. So we will ask you to, not right now, but at the end of the program, to fill out the evaluation. And shortly we will have a letter, because we are writing a letter to Donald Trump today, okay? And we're sending it to him today. So you'll get copies of it. The letter hasn't arrived as of yet, but those are the two things that we will be collecting back from you. Also, you will see a voter registration application. If you are not a registered voter, please fill it out and give it to one of us. We'll collect that from you. If not, what we'll do is have you take that home with you and register some young person who is 17, who will be turning 18, just to make sure that they're eligible to vote in the next election. Before I bring up my chapter president, I would like to bring up first our City Councilman, Rory Lanceman, followed by our Assemblywoman, Alicia Heidman, who is also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority. They're going to come up to bring greetings.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be with you, and it's good to be here, and it's good to be with the Deltas on this very, very special day. I'm Councilman Rory Lanceman. My district starts the other half of downtown Jamaica, from about Archer, Jamaica Avenue, up to including the area around Queens College and St. John's University. And in the City Council, I chair a committee on the justice system, which oversees the district attorneys, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, the public defenders, and the courts. So in the council, I'm sort of the guy who gets to oversee the civil and criminal justice system. You know, each of us approaches days like today, when we celebrate the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from our particular perspective, where we stand in life, and I guess, those of us who are public officials from what our particular responsibilities are. For me, as someone who spends so much time mired in the criminal justice system, and I get to see the inequality, the lack of accountability, the lack of transparency, day in and day out, can be disheartening throughout the year. But I'm very, very fortunate to work here in South Queens with other elected officials, Assemblywoman Hyndman, Congressman Meeks, who might be here later, but also the clergy as well. But it's a day like today where we are called upon to remember and to think about what it is that we're trying to do the other 364 days of the year. And for me, it's trying to make a justice system that is fairer, more accountable, and more equitable. And oftentimes, in the course of the work that we're doing, whether we're trying to reform the bail system or make sure that no one's sitting on Rikers Island because they can't afford $500 or $1,000 bail, that we come across something that Reverend King did or said in his life. You know, part of my responsibilities is this the criminal justice system, it's the civil justice system as well. And as I was driving here, there is a new documentary on the Memphis sanitation workers strike. That's what Dr. King was doing in Memphis when he was assassinated. So whether you're working on issues of workers' rights or the criminal justice system or whatever it is, you can find something in there that Dr. King taught us, how to be, how to live, and what to stand for. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon. I look forward to the program and to the panel. Thank you so much for letting me share a little bit of this very, very important day with you. And thank you very much for being such an important part of civic and community life here in Queens. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Rosalind. Good afternoon. The last time I saw most of my swords was this morning. To Reverend Lowe, thank you for allowing Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated Queens Alumni Chapter to once again do their MLK service in this church. It's good to be in the house of the Lord. And to probably, I think, and I'm biased, probably to the hardest working sorority. All right, come on now. I'm biased. Yes, I'm biased. 25 years will make you biased, right? Even if you're 1 year in NEOs, it doesn't matter. You picked the right organization. So, you know, I think about our honorary soror, Fannie Lou Hamer, especially with dealing with this president. And I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And with that, I have to remember that let's not focus too much on what he's saying. Good morning. Good afternoon. Let's focus on what we need to do next. All the steps that we take and the work that has to be done. And I know Delta's aren't afraid of work. So let's just continue to plot our path, regardless of what goes on in D.C., to make sure our communities are taken care of, our children, our seniors, making sure the most vulnerable don't feel afraid in this environment, making sure that we reach across the aisle and across the bridges to make sure our brothers who are Muslim, our sisters who are Muslim, feel welcome, because Queens is the most diverse place on this planet. And we represent that, being part of Queens Alumni. So without any further ado, I'm not sure I give the mic to, but everyone, the work that this organization continues to do to uplift Queens is always where I want to be. Thank you.
Thank you. So next, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Marie Carmel Durandis Presley, President of the Queens Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Yes, she did. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So our family and friends, welcome. Our community leaders, thank you so much for being here with us today. Family and friends, thank you. You all look so beautiful. My sorors of Queens Alumni, please stand up. You know I'm so proud of you all. Give yourselves a round of applause. I would like to give a special thank you to Mount Moriah Church for having us here today. This collaborative partnership is something that we are so grateful for, and we look forward to many, many, many years continuing on. I would like to thank Pastor Lowe for having us here, for his gracious hospitality, our social action chairs, Rosalind Spigner, our Mental Weeks, I don't see where she is, but our Mental Weeks, our social action committee for putting together such a wonderful program, members of Queens Alumni, and yourselves, our community stakeholders. We just celebrated our Founders Day, Saturday, January 13th. And prior to that, on January 12th, we lost two great pioneers in Delta Sigma Theta sorority. We lost two of our national presidents on the same day. We lost our 14th national president, Frankie Muse Freeman Esquire, and we lost our 17th national president, Mona Humphreys Bailey. Both were trailblazers and champions who fought tirelessly for civil rights in this nation. A little bit about Frankie Muse Freeman Esquire. She was the first woman to serve on the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and was appointed by President Lyndon B. Johnson and was subsequently appointed by Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter. So as you can see, she served under 4 presidents on this commission. A little bit about Mona Humphreys Bailey. She served on the American Civil Liberties Union National Advisory Council, Mothers Against Violence. She was an advocate for educational reform and held many positions as superintendent and assistant superintendent. She served as honorary co-chair for the annual Black Caucus Weekend in Washington, D.C., and I can go on and on and on about the wonderful contributions that these two amazing women did for our nation. So at this time, I would like for us to just take a moment of silence in homage for the wonderful work of these women and to realize that we are truly going to miss them, and they impacted us so deeply. So I'm going to ask us to just take a brief moment of silence. Thank you. We are going to be watching 2 clips today. The first clip is going to be on the bio of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The second clip is going to be about his last speech. You will see him giving his last speech, Mountaintop. We are going to have our liturgical dance selection from Abundance. And then, lastly, we are going to see our documentary. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, we have a long history of activism in the United States. Our first act as an organization was participating in the Women's Suffrage March. And if you can think about what that meant back in 1913, being a woman and being African American, how difficult that must have been. And we rose to the occasion, and we continue to rise to the occasion. I feel like we're traveling in this loophole and that history is unnecessarily repeating itself with the violence, with the racism based on our skin color, and people forget the content of our character. So as a Haitian American woman who stands here before you today, I am truly troubled by the vicious attacks and the vicious commentary that has been made regarding our people, regarding people of Hispanic descent, regarding immigrants, regarding the poor, regarding the less fortunate. So as a people, it is our responsibility to stand up and to take our nation back. And how do we take our nation back? That is the question. We take this nation back by making our voices heard through our elections. It's not enough to sit back and say, my sister and my brother will take care of it. It's not enough. As Black people, look at what we did in the state of Alabama, who was historically a red state. We turned it blue. Because what? We stood together, we rallied together, and we made our voices heard. What people fail to realize is that this nation was built off of the backs of African Americans. We built this nation. So to be deemed as second-class citizens and to be deemed as invaluable is disrespect to the utmost level, when if it weren't for us, this nation wouldn't be here. Okay? So we no longer pick cotton. We check the boxes in the ballot. We no longer serve the slave master, but we serve our God. And I'm going to continue and continue and continue to say this. We have been demoralized for centuries. We have been abused for centuries. We have been systematically crippled for centuries. And we have been forced to have a mentality, a slave mentality. And we need to break those shackles. And when I say we need to break those shackles, we need to no longer have the crab in a barrel mentality where we have to pick and climb and claw over each other to save ourselves. We no longer reside in the barrel. And if no one has our back, we need to have each other's back. There is too many of us who are educators, who are doctors, who are lawyers, who are engineers, who are elected officials. Why are we not rising up? Why are we sitting back and allowing other people to do the work for us? We are no longer the minority, brothers and sisters. We are the majority. And if Alabama didn't show you that, I don't know what else will. So we need to rise up and we need to come together. We need to go to the polls. We need to check that ballot. We need to make sure that we take over our Congress. We take over our Senate. And we make sure that our power is heard. We make sure that that happens. We no longer sit back and let someone else do the work for us. Too many of our trailblazers, too many people died for us. Too many people died for the right to vote. Too many people died so that we no longer have to ride on the back of the bus. Too many people died so that we can drink at the same water fountain. Too many people died for that. We cannot let our ancestors roll in their graves by just allowing ourselves to become complacent in the fact that we have affirmative action. It's not enough. We cannot be complacent because we have risen and our brothers and sisters have not. We cannot continue to do that. Like Michelle Obama said, it is our responsibility when we make it to turn back and to put our hand back and to bring our brothers and sisters forward with us. So on today, a day where one of the greatest men besides Jesus Christ who have ever walked this earth. He wasn't perfect, but he was human. And he had a heart for God, just like David. So we honor Dr. King today. We honor his work. We honor his legacy. It is our responsibility to serve. It is our responsibility to lead. Not only by words, but by our actions. So I ask that you internalize everything that you hear today. And I ask that the message that you receive here today, you go back and you share with your friends, your families, your communities, your neighbors. And let's take back our nation. Because we are no longer picking cotton, brothers and sisters. God bless you. Sorcery.
Thank you so much. Bringing on the Abundance Ministry.
Was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. Faith was always an important part of daily life, as both his father and grandfather were Baptist ministers. He thrived at a segregated high school, graduating at 15, before heading off to Morehouse College. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. Faith was always an important part of daily life, as both his father and grandfather were Baptist ministers. He thrived at a segregated high school, graduating at 15, before heading off to Morehouse College. He then dedicated 3 years to theological study at Crozier Seminary in Pennsylvania. While earning his graduate degree at Boston University, he met Coretta Scott, who he would marry and have 4 children with. King and his family settled in Montgomery, Alabama, when he became the 20th pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to relinquish her seat to a white man on a Montgomery City bus in 1955, the incident lit a fire under the burgeoning civil rights movement.
His boycott of the bus system in Montgomery, Alabama was tremendously successful because he was incredibly strategic and he worked with other people to get the individuals in Montgomery, Alabama to understand that they weren't going to take it anymore.
King's experience, passion for the cause, and position in the community gave him the credentials to become a leader in the 381-day boycott of the city buses. On December 20th, 1956, the Supreme Court ruled segregated buses to be unconstitutional. This was a major victory for the civil rights cause and proved King's nonviolent methods of protest could yield results. King was now the national face of the civil rights cause. He was jailed over 20 times, was once stabbed in the chest, his house was bombed, and he suffered relentless personal attacks on himself and his family. For a man of peaceful intentions, he unfortunately spent much of his life the target of violent intent, yet the threats never stopped him.
Dr. King inspired thousands of people through his eloquence and through his fearlessness, especially after his home was firebombed with his wife and his children.
Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days.
And through his fearlessness, especially after his home was firebombed with his wife and his children. They showed through their courage that they were prepared to give their lives to the cause of freedom.
King worked tirelessly to promote the cause he so strongly believed in. And from 1957 through 1968, he traveled over 6 million miles, delivered 2,500 speeches, wrote 5 books, and dozens of articles. His hard work and ability to communicate earned him such respect that he earned the ear of President John F. Kennedy, who personally met with King. Of all the speeches King delivered, none has stood the test of time like his famous I Have a Dream speech. Symbolically delivered from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in 1963, in front of 250,000 people, both black and white. King had become such a force in America that he was named Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1963. A nice achievement indeed, but it paled in comparison when in 1964, he became the youngest man ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
Martin Luther King Jr. was an American. He was deeply American. And what's striking to me is that he had more confidence and faith in American democracy, in the Constitution, and in the principles of fairness and opportunity than nearly all of his critics.
While in Memphis to lead a protest march defending the rights of striking garbage workers in April of 1968, King delivered a rousing speech titled, "I've Been to the Mountaintop." It would be his last. Standing on the balcony of his second-floor room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, King was shot and killed. In 1983, Ronald Reagan signed a proclamation declaring the third Monday of every January Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a public holiday to celebrate the man and what he stood for.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. So just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
This is a CBS News special report.
Dan Rather reporting for CBS News from New York. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was shot to death by an assassin late today as he stood on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King had planned to lead another civil rights march in Memphis next Monday. We got the latest on the story now from Russ Hodge, news director of WREC-TV.
Good afternoon. Let's give it up one more time for the Abundance Liturgical Ministry, dance ministry. It's great to see the generations working in unison and harmonious. My name is Jacques Leandre. I'll be your moderator for the next portion of our program. But before we go into our wonderful panel, we have with us the City Controller of the City of New York, Mr. Scott Stringer.
Thank you very much, and it is great to be back here with all of you. It's great to be here with one of the great members of Congress, Congressman Greg Meeks, and I just want to recognize him and all the elected officials, Senator Sanders, Councilmember Landsman. I also want to just shout out Rosalind Spigner and all that she does. Give her a big round of applause. And I just want to say, and then I have just two important controller proclamations, which are pretty incredible, that for me, these events are very inspirational, not because of ourselves, but because they really are teaching moments for the next generation. It is so imperative that we keep this dream alive by teaching our young people. And when young people are teaching young people, it's even more powerful. This past week, my 6-year-old came to me and said, "Daddy, in school, I learned about a great man." Just like that. I said, "Well, who'd you learn about?" He said, "Dr. King." Said it like this, Dr. King. And said that he was somebody who preached nonviolence. And my son says, and he said that everybody is equal. 6-year-old. 6-year-old. That is what we have to do. Deltas understand this. That's why Delta should run this town. Actually, Deltas do run this town, okay? Now, as a dad, I'm not going to tell you about one son and not the other. So my 4.5-year-old, no, these are my children, ma'am. They're not my grandchildren. And in church, people go, amen, when I tell a story about that. But it's okay. So my 4-year-old comes to me crying in the morning and says, "Daddy, I've been hurt." And he comes to me, he's an adorable little boy. He says to me, "I've been hurt." And they said, "You have a mark on your face. What happened? Who did this? And you're playing with these beads. Did you hit yourself?" He said, "No, Daddy, but I'm hurt." I said, "Well, Miles, you got to tell me how this happened." And he said, "The invisible man did this." Your grandmothers know the invisible man, right? I said, "Okay, come on. Who's the invisible man who hurt you?" And he looked at me and said, "Daddy, it was Donald Trump." So I'm here to tell you, straight on. So I'm here to tell you, as a dad, I have one son who's already learning about the teaching of Dr. King, and I have a 4.5-year-old who is already getting ready for 2020, okay? So I just want to tell you that. So very quickly, Deltas, I want to just present 2 awards. The first is, can I have a drum roll? To one of the greatest, most powerful organizations that I recognized for a very long time, for years of dedicated work to support African American women in New York City, for its devoted efforts to bring together New Yorkers to improve community. I recognize in the Controller's Office the great commendation to Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Here we go. Congratulations. And if Pastor would join me, this is a great congregation. This is such a great church. I wanted to present the Mount Moriah African Methodist Episcopal Church accommodation for the 60 years of outstanding work to build a strong and vibrant community in Queens, for your remarkable ministry and for all that you do. I'm very honored that you would have me here today. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. It's okay. We're good. And lastly, I just want to say, Pastor, to all of you and to the women here today, when I was a little kid, my cousin ran a long shot race for Congress. No one thought she could win. And my mother ran for city council as a single mom. No one thought she could win. The first was Bella Abzug, my cousin. The second, my mother. So when you say that women can't run and win, history says we run and win, and men have to also play that role. That's why I'm here today. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let's hear it again for our city controller, Scott Stringer. And I promise you, we have a phenomenal panel, but we have just one more speaker. We have the film. I'm being directed by Delta. We have the film.
This is James Jackson. You can't see his expression here, so it's impossible to know what's going through his mind at this moment, just after he killed another person. This is the man he murdered, Timothy Kaufman. James Jackson didn't know Kaufman, who he was, where he was from. He killed him for the one thing he did know about him, that he was a black man. Late at night on March 20th, Jackson's victim, Timothy Kaufman, found himself on this corner in Manhattan, just half a block from where he lived for 20 years. At 66 and retired, Kaufman made a small amount of money by collecting cans and bottles to recycle. That night, he was looking through a trash can on this corner when James Jackson came up from behind and stabbed him multiple times before running off. Bleeding, Kaufman somehow managed to make his way to the police station around the corner. When he was taken to the hospital, he was pronounced dead.
When I heard it, I cringed and just felt that knife, you know.
Thing would hurt me, you know, his purpose. He said he'd come to kill many black men as he can.
Here's the obituary.
Portia Clark and Carl Nimmons knew Timothy Kaufman since they were children, growing up here in Queens, New York.
Oh, that's Beyonce. Yeah. Tim had a knack for taking pictures with celebrities.
And he did it so much that they knew him.
Now check this out. During the last 15 years of his life, Timothy was a very frequent visitor to Washington, D.C., as he enjoyed attending the congressional hearings and budget policy sessions. Often, while he was collecting bottles and cans, he would save his money up and get a bus ticket and get on that bus, I don't know if it was a Greyhound bus or whatever, and go down to Washington to go to Capitol Hill. So he wasn't no stumble bum.
Yes, he was smart. That was
so he was about wanting change, okay?
For the better. So, that's what I'm saying. He was something else.
This is his bio that he put on Twitter. Can and bottle recycler, autograph collector in New York City, and I would love to visit California. I'm a good businessman. Standing in line, waiting to vote. I love America. Is there a particular quality of Tim's that you might miss the most?
Just his kindness, his knowledge.
For him, remembering him trying to always teach you something and relating it to you learning that there. Tell the next generation, tell that younger generation.
That's right. He was about each one teach one.
Yeah.
He always had something
To the
important
next,
to say.
to the next generation.
Yeah.
That was important to him.
A day after murdering Timothy Kaufman, James Jackson turned himself in to police after he saw footage of himself on the news. Jackson told police that Kaufman had been a practice target and they intended to kill more black men.
In court, what did it feel like when Tim's murderer came in and you saw him?
Well, I had anger, and I had like a knot in my stomach. I wanted him to feel pain that he gave me and the community.
The way he came out, chest out, head up, real proud.
When I seen him, I just started crying, and I couldn't stop. Color of his skin is that deep, you hate it that much. It's hard to believe.
According to detectives, a witness told them she heard Kaufman say after Jackson stabbed him, "Why are you doing this? What are you doing?"
This is what they handed out at the funeral. In memory of Timothy Kaufman, color does not attack color. Hate and prejudice are unnatural.
The murder of Timothy Kaufman could seem random and isolated, but the ideology of hate behind his killing seems to be growing. It was on display just a few months later when hundreds of white supremacists, white nationalists, and neo-Nazis gathered for a rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. They come from all over the country to protest the removal of a Confederate statue by local officials. Clashes with anti-racist demonstrators the next morning led the governor to declare a state of emergency. This forced rally organizers to move to a park a few miles away. One of the things we wanted to understand was if the rhetoric of the country's new president, Donald Trump, had emboldened these groups.
Media, a lot of people like to kind of be like, oh, it's Trump's fault, or Trump that caused this. I would say Trump was a megaphone that we picked up, is the best way to describe it. The internet is where we live, and I'm moving us out of that, kicking everyone off the internet, getting them out of here, getting them off their couches. My first objective is to create a white consciousness as well as a movement that's pro-white for white people.
Listening to the leaders speak gave us a window into the ideas that had drawn so many people here.
Now it's not over. Never. Now it's not over. The idea that I would ever back down when the governor of the state declares a state of emergency, if they think that, they don't understand what's in my heart, they don't understand the alt-right, they don't understand this entire movement.
The courage you showed today in defense of our people, our heritage, our country, our values, our freedoms will always remain in my memory in Charlottesville. This is a first step toward making a realization of something that Trump alluded to earlier in the campaign, which is this is the first step toward taking America back. We're here to talk about white genocide, the deliberate and intentional displacement of the white race, which is happening. We love our people, we love Europe, we love America, we love white people, and that's why we're here. And there's nothing wrong with that!
Just after the speech was finished, James Fields, a neo-Nazi, drove his car through a crowd of anti-racist demonstrators, killing a young woman and injuring dozens of others.
We're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, in violence on many sides. On many sides.
I think in many ways Charlottesville is our worst fears realized, right? We've just experienced the most racist campaign in modern history with Donald Trump, and it had the effect of energizing pretty much every faction of the extreme right in the United States. It's not surprising that this ended in violence, right? These are movements that are deeply connected to domestic terrorism and to hate crimes. This is a completely kind of predictable thing.
Real law! Yes, you do. Yes, you're weak. You are weak. You do not have enough testosterone to fight. You guys protect Muslims who hate you.
It's hard to make sense of the violence in Charlottesville and the way the hate and anger on display there is manifesting across the country. While government data shows that over half of all hate crimes go unreported, we still know that hate crimes and bias incidents have risen over the past few years, particularly those against the Muslim community, according to the FBI. In 2015, the last year federal data is available, anti-Muslim crimes rose 67% from the previous year.
You have 30 days to leave your residence. No one wants you there, and the U.S. government wishes you to be gone. Got it? Leave my mother city. Just leave, or you're all going to be in trouble.
That's part of a voicemail that was left at this small mosque in Eugene, Oregon. The man who left it called after he had already approached worshipers here one evening in May, threatening to kill them.
This is the first time in many years. A person coming physically to the mosque and saying that he will kill Muslims. So, okay, we'll learn also, what do we say after that?
Haitham is a member of the mosque and leads classes for the children. Many of the kids who attend the mosque witnessed the man threatening to kill worshipers. He was arrested the next day after he threatened someone else in a park nearby. He was released for time served after 2 months in jail. He's now out and free. Now that he's out, do you feel in danger again?
You know, to be honest, some of the kids also are traumatized by... There were like 3 kids that were hearing this. He was claiming he has a weapon in his bag. I really can't imagine. You know, one of my fears, to be honest, is what if, you know, this situation happens to me in front of my kids that could apprehend, and I feel helpless. Go play with them. Go see what they're doing. We talked about, you know, even if somebody that hates you, we can't fight hate with hate. We focus on the actions implementing Islam or the teachings of Islam in our life. And one of them is with dealing with hate or, you know, dislike. What we're gonna do instead of hate?
We're gonna love each other.
And love will change the people even after a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a peculiar thing, though, because most young kids don't have to be taught how to respond to hate. I mean, my kids go to summer camp, and that's not a part of the curriculum.
Hate crimes are being on the rise, unfortunately. To be honest, Eugene has been a nice place. It's been changing a little bit, and being bullied in school or, you know, somewhere else is becoming as a norm those days, and teaching them how to respond is very important. All right, Noor, what would be an advice for all of us?
I would say that show love and compassion to everyone in face of all the hatred that's been happening lately.
When you consider what happened here and what happened just up the road at Portland on the train, does it make you feel targeted as a community?
Of course. You know, when incidents come after another, it raises a real issue in the community.
Just a few weeks after the threat to the Eugene Mosque, 2 men were killed on a metro train in Portland, Oregon. when they tried to stop a man from yelling at two black girls, one who was wearing a hijab. This is the man that killed them, Jeremy Christian, during his arraignment.
Death to the enemies of America. Leave this country if you hate our freedom.
This place has become a memorial to the two men and the third who was wounded on May 24th on that attack.
Is he an active member of a group?
No, he wasn't. I mean, he sort of floated in and out, and he would show up at alt-right rallies. Those places will try to distance themselves from the extremists, but they also bring them on board at the same time. On the top level, it brings in a lot of people who are kind of mainstream. They just don't want to pay their taxes, or they're pro-gun, or, you know, they're sort of mainstream issues. And then you go farther down and it becomes kind of an anti-government ideology, and then it becomes an anti-Semitic ideology, and at the very bottom are sort of the Timothy McVeighs who believe that there's a need for a revolution, a second American revolution, and I think that's where Jeremy Christian was.
You call it terrorism, I call it patriotism. You hear me? Die.
Is it danger from the groups, or is it bubbling down to these individuals that are so much harder to track?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question, because when they are organized and out as a group, we can see them, we can take their pictures, we know who the players are. It's the person who's sitting at home in front of their laptop that is getting angrier and angrier at the world. The world of hate has changed. There used to be organized hate groups that you became a member of, and those folks are still there, but their importance in the white supremacist counterculture has really dropped because of the internet, where people can kind of participate. There's a Klan rally happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week online that you can drop into any time that you want.
Who are you? I'm not talking about your name or your occupation. I'm talking about something bigger, something deeper.
The problem is that echo chamber really becomes a magnification chamber, and the more I'm in that world, the more angry I get, and the more limited my explanations of what's happening. I have basically one explanation. You know, it's a conspiracy.
Some could say I'm a European. To be exiled.
And so these people are the good people, and these people are the bad people, and you get this kind of very black and white thinking, which is very appealing to young people, especially young males. And you get two things. One is you get a rationale of how the world works and who the bad people are, and the second is you get an action plan. You have to fight them.
In the case of James Jackson, after he was arrested, he told a New York newspaper that he only shared his views online, like that he believed, quote, the white race is being eroded. One of the sites he specifically mentioned was the white supremacist site, the Daily Stormer. All of this raises the question, what responsibility do tech companies have when it comes to dealing with hate speech online?
I think that the tech companies in general have not done enough to battle white supremacy on their networks. White supremacists are using major platforms to get their ideas out. There's nothing different about this than ISIS. We've been working with the tech companies to try to get them to take these issues more seriously, and maybe now, after Charlottesville, they will. I don't know. I don't know how many wake-up calls you need on this.
In the aftermath of Charlottesville, a number of sites, including the Daily Stormer, had their domain registrations revoked. But on the world's largest social media site, Facebook, there are deeper problems in the way hate speech can thrive.
Something like this, which is a mockery of the murder of this black child, they would take this down. They didn't take it down. For a very long time, I reported it dozens of times. And I think it came down eventually after several months.
Malkia Cyril is the director of the Center for Media Justice and an activist with Black Lives Matter in the Bay Area. Activists like Malkia have been working to make tech companies understand how to recognize racism on their platforms. How does Facebook define hate speech?
Here, right here. Anything that directly attacks people based on what are known as their protected characteristics.
That seems straightforward, is that?
Yeah.
Is there a problem with it?
Yeah, it's a problem with it because race means that white is as protected a class as black, which the problem is when you live in a society where everything protects white people and very few things protect black people, making those two things equally protected doesn't work. It actually overprotects white people and underprotects black people.
What this often translates to is people of color being censored by Facebook for speaking out about racism.
While something like this is allowed to stay on Facebook, you have black activists that say things like white supremacy is real. I mean, Leslie Mack, her post said something like that, right? And her post was taken down and she was banned. Algorithms are programmed by human beings, and human beings are not race neutral. Make America white again.
Look at that.
Right.
Trump, make America white again.
This crosses the line, for example, and this is the kind of thing that I'm going to report this photo.
What's the message to you out of that photo?
Make America white again?
Yeah.
Get rid of me. I don't belong here. I don't have the right to live here, and by any means necessary, they're going to make sure I don't feel welcome. It's not a slur. It's not a call for violence explicitly, but when you say make America white again, how exactly do you plan on doing that?
It could be tempting to see all of this as solely related to Donald Trump. But it's more that the president has tapped into something that's been brewing for much longer.
2014 is when Black Lives Matter really began to take root. And that is when I think we began to see some real backlash.
In the year 2000, the Census Bureau announced for the first time ever that white people would be a minority. At that time they said 2042, I think the date is somewhere around there. And that's the moment basically when we saw the number of hate groups in the United States start to rise.
That rise is reflected in attacks from the past decade. Like when a neo-Nazi killed 6 people at a Sikh temple in Wisconsin in 2012. And in 2014, when a white supremacist killed 3 people outside a Jewish retirement center. And in 2015, when Dylan Roof gunned down 9 African Americans in a church in Charleston, South Carolina. Overall, from 2001 up till the end of last year, there were 62 attacks in the US by far-right violent extremists, according to government data. And in the same time period, there were 23 attacks by quote-unquote radical Islamist violent extremists. Despite that, since taking office, Trump has cut funding for groups that work to combat white supremacist and right-wing violence.
It's not just Trump who hasn't been serious enough about white supremacist domestic terrorism. During the Bush years, there was obviously this intense refocusing on radical Islam. I mean, more than 3,000 people died at the Twin Towers, and you can understand why that would be. What the Bush administration did was completely drop the efforts that were put in place after Oklahoma City to address white supremacy and kind of militia violence. The thing that makes it more problematic, I would argue, than radical Islam in the United States context, I'm not talking about overseas, is white supremacy is indigenous to this country. It was founded on white supremacy. We fought a civil war on white supremacy. Our first domestic terrorist group was the Ku Klux Klan that was set up after the Civil War ended in 1865. So this is an idea that's not going anywhere.
After Charlottesville, polling showed that the majority of people said that they didn't agree with the views of white supremacists or neo-Nazis. But almost 40% still said that they felt like white people were under attack in the US. And almost a third said that white European heritage needed to be protected in America.
Leave. You're not wanted here. He the one grabbed the gun. You just hear him talk. He pulled the gun out. What's that? Be a man.
Blood and soil. This is a white country.
This country was built for white folks, not you. This was never your country. You've always been oppressed in this country, and it's terrible. You should go.
Go back to Africa. Like we're all. Look at your home countries. They're pieces of. They're
What you say? What you say?
There is a constant in America, which is change. We're a nation of immigrants. We're changing in terms of our demographic population. We're always going through this change, and the ability to manage that change is key to this. It's either exciting and adds to the diversity and strength of the nation, or there are people that want to make America great again. That has been manifested in many ways, including the alt-right having their rallies in public.
We're taking time off work to do this because it's important and it matters.
So what are y'all gonna do when you gotta go to work Monday and bring all the black people that you shake hands with and act like you ain't racist?
Leave America.
I can be here.
Leave it. This is our country.
Back to wherever the you come from, lady. Y'all think you... Hey, tell them to go back where they belong.
But it's also manifesting in ways that are less obvious than rallies like Charlottesville. There seems to be a broader unraveling of civility happening in smaller ways across the country.
People just feel like it's open season now on anybody that doesn't fit their picture of who America is supposed to be.
Listen, I said, excuse me. Go back. Where are you from?
That mouthpiece, Donald Trump, is making it so that I think this deep, abiding resentment that I think has been brewing since the Civil War. This is not nothing new.
Obama's not in office anymore. We don't have a Muslim in there anymore. Yeah, I wish he was gone. He's gone. Yeah. He may be in jail too in the future.
Now, in reaction to whatever small progressive wins they think we got under Obama, it has flourished. It is a full-fledged raging fire.
You don't just strike up a conversation with people in line talking about stuff like that if you're normal. I'm very normal, yeah.
What Donald Trump opened the door to isn't just hate. Hate was there. He opened the door to turning that hate into a physical reality that threatens the lives of millions of people.
What are we gonna do from here? You know, what can we do from here?
Though James Jackson has been charged for taking their friend's life, Portia and Carl told us that they plan on going to every court appearance that they can until he's sentenced, to make sure the court knows that Timothy Kaufman was loved and that they want justice for him.
That's all we can do. Make sure he get justice and try to prevent something like that happening again. You read it, watch it on the news, and you turn to the next page. You know, I can't turn the page on this and, you know, just forget. I couldn't turn the page.
Tim was a great guy. He's done a lot for the community. We just don't want his name to be forgotten.
Thank you, Congressman, and safe journey. Well, as a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, I would be remiss if I didn't send a special shout out to the wonderful, intelligent, brilliant, illustrious, loyal, royal sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, Queens Alumni Chapter. Thank you for all that you do, and your work is just not relegated to gender. The Embody program that you have is phenomenal, where they're helping to turn that paradigm as it relates to our young black men. And thank you for the work that you do every single weekend on that nationally. Well, you have the bios. If you're not familiar with our panelists, please read their background and all of their accomplishments. But for the interest of time, I'm not going to read their bios. But I would like to introduce, we have with us Andrew Jackson, not the 7th President of the United States, but Professor Andrew Jackson, also known as Sekou Malefe. We have also with us Dr. Sadia N. Lawton. We have with us Ms. Portia Clark and Carl Nimmons. Man, we have doctors everywhere. We have Dr. Sanea R. Banks. And we have Attorney Gurpal Singh. And we have some clergy up here as well. We have Reverend Rashad McPherson. And from the NYPD, we have Commanding Officer Molinari. We're going to ask that our panelists please keep their remarks to 2.5 minutes, going on 3 minutes. And I've just been given the side eye by one of our wonderful deltas that it's been cut down to 1.5 minutes. And we have a timekeeper that has everything color-coded. Green means you're okay, yellow means you're entering danger zone, and red means you're actually in danger. Please write down your thoughtful questions and who your questions should be addressed to. Well, for Professor Jackson, can you just please give us a brief history of hate crimes in America, what has changed and what has stayed the same in terms of mentality, execution, and targets of this type of crime?
In 1492, I go back to 1492 when Columbus came here. That's when the slave trade began, and that's when hate crime began in America. And that's why there's so much confusion over statues about Christopher Columbus in this country. You go down to the Caribbean, they don't celebrate Christopher Columbus. There's a whole different reaction to Christopher Columbus there. But the enslavement of African people in this country was the first hate crime that we faced. And when you see videos like this where they're telling us to go back home, we didn't ask to come here. They enslaved us, kidnapped and enslaved us, and brought us here. And if it was not for African people, we'd still be reading by candlelight. African people built this country. When you look at the plantations, who built the plantations? African people built the plantations. How were we treated? Mistreated. We were abused. And one of the conflicts that I use in my course that I teach African studies at New York College is the contradictions and paradoxes of American history. They brought us here, they mistreated us, but they trusted us to take care of their children. They brought us and mistreated us, but they trusted us to cook their food. They glad I wasn't in that kitchen. They brought us here, they abused us, we built the country, we used our skills and talents to create inventions that made life better in America. There's not only traffic lights in black communities, there's traffic lights all over the world. The third rail on the subway wasn't just for subways in a black neighborhood, it's all over the world. We have been responsible for the development of America, but America has never appreciated black people. And then you have people like 45. Now, I can't say the name anymore because I get ready to throw up every time I say that name, so I just refer to him as 45. people like 45 who say that we're lazy, shiftless people. But we built this country. He says that, he talks about Haitians and people from Africa and people from El Salvador. Does he realize, we need to go back to the college he graduated from because he didn't get this history. There are more people from the Caribbean, from the African countries, and from Central South America who come here as immigrants with college degrees, advanced degrees, and PhDs than any European country. But we're shiftless and lazy, and we need to go back home. If they took all of the immigrant people, and remember, everybody in America is immigrant except for Native Americans. This is their country, and they stole it from them. If they took all the immigrant people and sent them back to their homeland, America would be a desert. If it had not been Haiti, you wouldn't have had the Louisiana Purchase. No, so when you think about these things that are hate crimes, the first hate crime is the lack of information and misinformation that's been spread about people of color for centuries in this country. We are Africa. That's who we are. But we are American. When they try to colonize us and send us back, I mean, third, fourth generation Africans said, wait a minute, I don't know anything about Africa. My ancestors came from there, but we built this country. We fought in every war in this country. We have made a difference in this country. America would not be what it is if it wasn't for us. The hate crimes has been the abuse of people of color. Not just black African people, people of color in this country for decades that America cannot come to terms with. And that's what we have to really deal with. Misinformation, lies, and the information that has been shared from people like 45 who has no idea what he's talking about.
Professor Jackson.
But just because he said it, it's true. Don't get me started.
We have a question now for Dr. Sadia Lawton. And we understand, Doc, that you have a book. I don't know if it's been published yet or it's about to be published, but we have the manuscript. And it's called Contested Meanings, Philadelphia's 19th Century Audience Responses to Black Icons and Identities. The question is, quite simply, can you speak to the white supremacist statutes around New York and the country and the message and the intimidation that it may have on communities of color and otherwise?
Yes, so I wanted to give you a quick history, if I can, about the statues, the Confederate statues that exist. They basically came about in 3 waves, if you want to think about it in that sense. Shortly after emancipation, 1865, once the Civil War ended, it started in small cemeteries, small groups got together, families wanted to create something to commemorate their soldiers that passed away and their loved ones. They weren't major statues as the ones that are being taken down right now. At the same time, I want you to think also in terms of the ebb and flow of the time frames that are coming in terms of sort of this as a reactionary period and using the statues as a way, as a means to react to black empowerment. So coming out of disenfranchised period, we have, of course, a lot of black political officials getting into the Senate. We have a wave of us thriving throughout the Reconstruction period. And then when that ends in 1889 roughly, we start to see a backlash, right? And then we start to see these various sort of de facto and de jure types of policies that get put in place. And those start to take away our rights again. That's when you see the spike, okay, in these Confederate monuments being built. The highest spike around 1910, 1912, which also coincides with the largest amount of lynchings happening at this time, also coincides in terms of the time frame with the mass exodus from the South to the North, the Great Migration. And so for those reasons, we see blacks supposedly going into industrialized northern areas, and the notion or the mythology that goes along with a lot of these mythological statues and the notions that sort of are harbored or retained in these statues, is that black men are starting to take away from the economic plight of white men. And again, remember I said earlier, all of this coincides as a sort of reactionary period. So these statues are being built and also constructed specifically, I can go into detail later, on Greco-Roman, Romanesque sort of ideals in the way they're designed, the way that they are presented. They are supposed to represent emperors who have great knowledge, their oratorical skills, and their prowess within the community. They're supposed to represent the ideals, and those ideals, as we know, was white racism and maintaining power, basically. And the third wave, because I see I got the red card, although red means something different for me. The third wave would come around the time period of the Civil Rights Movement. Some of the things that were happening during them is 1954, Brown versus Board of Ed gets reversed. So all of these schools that were built early in the public school system, starting about 1828 to 1829 or so, when they were first developed, they're being desegregated. And so again, we see a spike in the monuments being built as a sort of commentary, if you will, a reminder that we are in power, we control you. So not only do you see that happening, but you also see the naming of the schools, okay, they're being renamed. The other thing that I want to take into consideration is that it's not just the renaming of the schools. We also have the public housing system, and this is one, for me, I haven't seen any literature really speaking to this, because we see the naming of the public housing systems also reflecting some of the names of these sort of, Confederate people who are, who disenfranchised us. And finally, I want to say this, and this is something also that is really important. We have to look at the pediments that are on the buildings, because we use a Greco-Roman ideals, and they are also, if we're taking down statues, we have to look at the pediments. So there's some interesting iconography going on in there.
Oh, thank you so much, Donna. You know what? We're going to try something a little bit different. We're going to the top row. To see if we have a better chance at adhering to the time limit from the top row. But seriously, we have Miss Portia Clark as well as Mr. Carl Nimmons, who were featured in the documentary that we just saw. They were close friends to Mr. Kaufman that was brutally murdered. And can you tell us, what would you want us to take away from what you experienced having a close friend murdered in such a way?
Well, we would like to take away all of this racism. This is ridiculous. We're moving backwards. You understand? Church, check this out. Timothy wasn't murdered. Timothy was lynched. Right. He was lynched. Right. The only thing missing was the tree to hang him from. And I pray to God that we're not going back to strange fruits, if you know what I mean. Yeah. You understand? Yeah. It's just outrageous. There are several things that we would like to see.
Yeah, we would like to see, the mic working?
Yes.
We would like to see a street sign put up, in his name to remember him. And I would like to see people loving each other more, teaching the young kids that we all are God's children. We all were born the same, we all eat the same, we bleed the same, and we die the same. But it seems very hard for everybody to come together with that, But I would love to see that take place, and to take away that pain that I have got from Timothy Kaufman. That was a pain I just can't get rid of. I watched the film again, and it hit me. It hit me all over again, like brand new. It's when you're young, in my life, growing up in the project, you're young, you kind of like handle those problem yourself. You know, but you get older, you get a little wiser. I see where I have to handle it through talking, you know, preaching, walking, teaching the next one. It seems like a very slow process. In the younger days, you get gratification by just doing whatever you got to do without thinking. I'm too old to do those things. Because when I looked at him in the courthouse, how little he was, and he came out with that chest so proud, I just wanted to jump up and bust him over the head, you know. But I know I couldn't do that.
And also, we need signatures. So I would really appreciate, you know, at the end of the program that you all can sign a petition. We have 100 signatures, but you know what? They said I needed 500. So it would be very, very helpful.
Well, Ms. Portia, you're in the right place. I know if there's any organization that can get it done, it's the Deltas. And Rosalind Spigler will work closely with you to make that happen.
And I just want to say, Rosalind, I appreciate you calling on us. I thank you very much.
And the next question is for Dr. Sonia Banks. We understand that you are a clinical psychologist. And before we ask the question, well, the main question, can you give us a diagnosis of 45?
Yes. Narcissistic sociopath. Because I know my time is short and shorter now. One of the ways I framed what I wanted to say is, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? And this comes from a musician named Davis, who was playing as the only black musician with a white group singing country music. You may have heard about him. And one time a gentleman from the KKK joined him and started talking. And he asked him that question as they went back and forth. And he said, well, I'm a member of the KKK. This is the first time I've ever had a drink with a black man, ever. And this man was about 48 years old. And Davis then started asking questions. Every time he went on tour, he would start to talk and ask people, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? And when he ran into white people, one at a time, and he's been doing this since 1986, and he claims that 100 people that he talked to have left the KKK organization just because of contact with this particular musician, this country musician. And so I wanted to quickly bring out a few points. You know, part of our challenge in understanding the impact of hate coming out of 45's mouth as a megaphone for what has been the undercurrent since the Civil War is trying to reframe in our psychological minds the notion that we can be hated and despised to the point where we will always be hated and despised. Let me say that again. There's a psychological theory that talks about in-group and out-group. And if you are the in-group, if you are the white people believing that you are, for whatever reason, ordained to be the only race in this country, and you find any other group challenging that position, particularly people that you once owned as property, that were a commodity, that have the right to no longer be property but stand up and face you one-on-one, and you have never accepted that. Your grandfather didn't accept it, your great-great-great-great-great-grand, nobody accepted it. They went along with it because it became illegal. But once they got the megaphone in office, all of those feelings and beliefs and expectations, those silent agreements that white supremacists have made and white people born into an oppressive consciousness made, came to light. And they still are lit. And so their ability to hide behind racist beliefs and psychological pedagogy comes from the fact that they have never seen this country as anything but their country, and they have not seen us as anything but their former property. Now, one might argue, well, how can you say that? There's so many strides, there's so much evidence of change in mentality, and I ask you, really? Because we have the fortune of doing the research, and each time we look at the data, it suggests there's something else going on. And lastly, I'll say that there were some researchers that did a study with Hillary and Trump, pre-election and post-election. They asked two questions. One, what's your interaction with social groups other than yourself? And then they asked the second question, the negative things that you think about other groups, How did you get there? Why do you believe them? They asked the question after the election, after Trump got in, and both groups, those of us that voted for Hillary and those of us that voted for Trump, we did not change our negative views about the people that we had negative views from. And it gets worse. We even assess negative views to people that Trump didn't even talk about, Canadians and overweight people and some with disabilities. Hate is a monster, it's a disease, and it can uproot and change anything. So I'll answer more questions because my time is up.
Thank you so much, Doc. Well, we're going to go back down to the lower level to see if we've improved. Attorney Gurpal Singh, we know you handle tons of immigration cases, civil rights cases. Have you seen a change in the intake stream of the cases that come to your office now under this new administration?
Yeah, there's definitely been changes. I mean, there's one area where the president has king-like power, you know, like almost extreme levels of power in immigration laws. And so it's called plenary power. And Trump knows that, and he's using it. You know, if there's anything he wants, it's power. And so in the area of immigration, that's why you hear him talk about immigration so much, is because he has supreme power in this area, generally. I mean, Congress is there, but the president has almost overriding authority. And so almost instantly, when he came into power, you saw everything slow down. You know, everything slowed down. Where it would take a client 3 months to get a decision on a particular matter, now we're talking over a year. You know, a year and a half to get any information back from the federal government, from the USCIS or any of the other agencies, where you would see people getting picked up and the bonds would be tripled. So let's say somebody gets picked up and they don't have paperwork, and usually it was a $1,000 bond, now you're talking about $8,000 bonds. I have a client who had a $45,000 bond put on. There seemed to be just even the number of people who are getting citizenship is declining. You know, it's getting much harder for people to become. It makes sense, you know, because the average person who becomes a citizen as an immigrant, the vast majority register as Democrats. I would say 80 to 90% register as Democrats. So as a Republican, you would want to slow that down anyway. Yeah. But there's a whole history. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has heard of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. You know, that was the first racially formed policy that says no more Chinese people, pretty much. That's it. We don't want Chinese people. And then after that, there was in 1921, there was a quota system put in place that said that we're trying to maintain an ethnic quota in this country. And so the ethnic quota meant a white quota. We didn't want others to come in and mix. Indians, like myself, were barred in 1921 for coming in. Other Asians, Indians. And only in 1965 with the INA, the Immigration and Nationality Act, connected to the civil rights movement, did those bars get taken away from ethnic minorities and were allowed to come in. But the precedence is there to limit people by their race and ethnicity. The precedent is there. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney. And now we bring it to the spiritual realm. Reverend Rashad, what role should the Black church take in this current civil rights movement? Wow. Can we just give a moment to clap a little bit louder? He stayed within his minute and a half. But last but not least is the commanding officer of the NYPD. He's been an officer for 22 years, a captain for 9.5 years, and he's also now the commanding officer of the Hate Crime Task Force. We're going to ask Commanding Officer Molinari to just discuss a bit about some of the cases that come across your desk and what kind of investigation is actually taking place now, especially as it pertains to the Southeast Queens.
Okay. Again, thank you for having me here. I thank Detective Cooper for inviting me and involving me in this community. I thank the councilman who I lost in the lights before about his recognition now as part of the Public Safety Committee, and I look forward to working with him in the future. I was given about half an hour's worth of questions, and then I was told to answer it in 5, and now I'm told to answer it in a minute and a half. So I have a lot to go over, and I don't know where to begin with that question. Hate Crimes Task Force, we investigate hate crimes, as was identified before by the moderator. It's criminality based on the 10 identified classes, which you did an excellent job of recounting. If anybody wants to grab me later, I'll gladly go into it further, but I clearly don't have the time. I'm not going to get yelled at by a Delta like everybody else has. We did have an increase in hate crimes last year versus the previous year, an increase from 309 to 345 at the time. We had a slight decrease. I'm sorry, I apologize, that goes back 2 years. Last year we did have a decrease of only a couple of crimes with 338 versus 345. Now that is citywide, and that is documented, reported hate crimes. So as one of the videos said, I do acknowledge also that they're underreported. So we did have a decrease. We're excited about a decrease. I use that term loosely because I'm not that excited because it's still about 338 too many hate crimes. So we get that number down to 0 and I can get fired from this job, then I'll be happier when there's 0. As far as Queens overall is looking at, one of the questions I was asked is Southeast Queens. I've never worked in Queens specifically, so you might have to help me. Queens, as far as the police department is concerned, is divided into 2 geographic boroughs, Queens North, Queens South. Queens South last year saw an increase in hate crimes, 19 versus 13, and Queens North saw a decrease, 35 versus 39. So overall, Queens, as a very diverse borough, is 54 versus 52. So they're teetering on even. We see 54 crimes. Again, if you put that into the 338 number that I said, it's on par with the geography. As hate crimes go, it's very hard to group them together. They're spread out, a number like 338, into 77, soon to be 78 precincts in New York City. It's hard to identify one precinct that has a large majority of the crimes. As far as the investigation goes, I supervise a unit of 25 investigators. We handle those 338 cases. That gives each one of my guys about 20 to 30 cases a year. It's a very small number in comparison to precinct detectives handling robberies and homicides and shootings. They're handling 200 cases a year. So my guys are handling a lesser number, and we do give the full focus of the unit. Major incidents, we respond out, full enforce the entire unit, and we can reach out to my supervisory command, Special Victims Division with 275 people, the Detective Bureau with 4,000 people. If I need to go up that high, I can. And most importantly, since I'm already getting yelled at by a Delta, I'm going to lose it in the sea of Delta red, though I can't see it right now. Most importantly, my commanding officer, the commanding officer of the Special Victims Division, is a deputy chief, and he joined the Hate Crimes Task Force as a captain in 2002. So for the past 15, now 16 years, the deputy chief has been overseeing every hate crime investigation in this city. I call him the nationwide expert on law enforcement hate crimes. We have the largest law enforcement hate crime specific dedicated unit in the NYPD, and I'm going to say we're the most transparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, CO Molinari. Well, this is the fun part of the program here. Anyone with a question, hopefully it's written down on your card, and you will let us know to whom it should be addressed. And you can go to one of the microphones, I believe, in the aisles and ask your question. And we'll start from my left, going right. One, two, three. 1, 2, 3.
My name is Leroy Smith. I have a question for the officer. And reference to a hate crime. A young man was shot in the back while running away from a police officer. Would you call it a hate crime? When the officer was questioned as to why, he said, I felt threatened.
Good question.
So how can that be? How can that not be considered a hate crime, and how can that excuse be accepted to say that I felt threatened when a young man was running away from him?
Okay. Thank you for your question. I'm not in the investigation of police officers unit. The incident that you're speaking of, if it was in New York City, I'm not aware, or elsewhere. It does get to be a gray area, but my unit, or hate crime unit, citywide, FBI, DOJ, whoever's involved in the investigation, a hate crime is a crime that is motivated by somebody's identity in one of the 10 protected groups. So the question to be asked is, did that officer shoot that person because he was a certain identity? And if you can't answer that question with yes, I believe the moderator said before, wholly or in part of the reason why. Wholly, 100% of the reason was, or 51% of the reason was that that person was a victim of a crime was because of their identity, a hate crime can be charged in that. So I hope I answered your question the best I can as far as my investigations go.
We'll go to the middle aisle.
My question is for Professor Jackson. You made mention that that 45 has a lack of knowledge of what contributions that blacks have made in this country. How do we get that information to our children, who I feel that we and somewhat failed them in getting that information about all of the contributions that we have made? So if we get it there and make sure that we get it out to the general public, it just seems to be, in one area, it's not, everybody doesn't get to hear it, and if they heard it, then our kids would be prouder about all of the accomplishments we've made in this country.
If you remember back in the 80s, Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Sanford, Adelaide Sanford, and a group of bicultural educators created a curriculum of inclusion that is still sitting in somebody's file cabinet in Albany and has never been approved and never been reviewed. A hate crime is that our children, and I get them at the college level. This past semester, I had 26 freshmen out of 37 students in my class that didn't know who Dr. King was, didn't know where he gave the I Have a Dream speech, and didn't know why it was given in Washington, D.C. That's a hate crime. The fact that our children grow up in this country and don't know the real history of America. They know the European version of America. They know the colonized history of America. They don't know that the first 7 presidents were all slave holders. They don't know that Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921 was a hate crime. That is a crime that our children grow. You can get a PhD in America, and if you don't take black studies, you will not learn about 3/4 of the history of this country. That needs to change. If that would change, then every student would come away with a greater knowledge of American history, the real, true American history. Not just the black contribution, but the Asian contributions, the Native American contributions, all of the contributions of every culture in this country of what made America what it is. And that is the biggest hate crime that we have going on, the miseducation of our people.
Reverend McPherson would like to comment on this as well.
Thank you, Brian. Can I add one thing to that? And that is, We cannot hold any Board of Education responsible for teaching our children our history. That's our responsibility. And the churches and the community groups and the libraries and the cultural organizations, sororities and fraternities need to go back to what we started with Marvin Collins in Chicago, have our own schools where we teach our own children, not formal educational institutions, but places where we teach our children on a regular basis our history. That is our story.
Amen.
Until the lion has his own storyteller, the tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter.
Thank you, Professor Jackson. To my far right.
So my question is addressed to three of the panelists in particular, Dr. Banks, Professor Jackson, and the Reverend. And it has to do with the concept of reconciliation, because that concept, it seems to me, is very important in bringing about changes in places like South Africa and Liberia. And I'm wondering, is that an important concept for us today? Is it a necessary step, an effective step? And if so, how do we bring that about? How do we have reconciliation in this country? Because I think it's amazing, a missing piece of the puzzle, and we've yet to do that. So.
Dr. Banks, can you take the...
So that brings to mind a few things. So yes, I think there are 2 or 3 steps for reconciliation. We have to have psychological reconciliation. One of the horrors of mindedness, and if my history is wrong, correct me, but I think it's okay, so Dr. Jackson, I'm going to lean on you. The notion that when our Congress had an opportunity, I think it was our Black Caucus, being asked under Clinton's leadership, do you want to have a restoration, an actual ritual, an actual dedication to the fact that we went through so much done publicly for you in this country, and at that point either we weren't united or we had competing priorities and agendas, and we didn't take the stage to do that. So to answer the question, in order for us to now take advantage of what this intense gap is forming, this gap between P45 and P44, we need to consider what would it take for psychological reconciliation. And I think it's the programs. I think it's the focus on teaching our own. There are psychological microaggressions and macroaggressions going on with our children right now. There's secondary trauma with these 2 that will never probably be fully rooted without intense concentration on education. So I think if we take our after-school programs, our preschool programs, our church school programs, and our sorority programs and make sure that we focus on some form of psychological reconciliation around the microaggression of racism and hate as an education, will be starting the work. And it happens to be in the work right now with ADLED. So we will be moving our program forward after school to look at art.
Thank you, Dr. Banks.
The other part of that is, if you remember in South Africa, reconciliation happened after they agreed and they understood that they admitted that they had created that crime of apartheid in South Africa. America hadn't even admitted that they had slavery yet. So we have to admit that there's a problem with white people and black people in America, or white people and others in America. America has not come to terms with that yet. You have to have that common ground in order to consider reconciliation.
Reverend McPherson. And if over 50% of the hate crimes reported are perpetuated by Thank you, Reverend McPherson. Dr. Lauren?
I would just like to add to this notion of what we are doing with and for our youth. If you have a youth in your family, in your neighborhood, someone you're connecting with on a regular basis, please make sure that you either control, monitor, or filter the social media materials that are coming through to them, because, and I'm up here as an art historian to speak to that specifically because it falls into our category of how we visualize and how things are being represented and how messages, okay, are being filtered through to them and how they get the information that they're getting. It's the same thing that sort of prompted Dylan Roof and all these other people who are getting these same similar messages that promote their violent actions. So please do that on your own.
Thank you. We have a question from the far left.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question is, and basically already answered it, but would you consider Dr. King's dream as important today as when he made his dream speech? And number two, how can we get young people involved that they would come to a program like this?
Who would like to tackle that question first?
I'll take a pick at it. I actually think the dream is obviously, in my mind, more important now. Because we have someone who is leading us that has no notion about what the dream is about. So now things that were said over 40 years ago and over 500 years ago, frankly, are still guiding us. This dream is so essential because we need a vision. When you have somebody leading you that doesn't understand the value of intergroup understanding, that uses language to pit one people against another people, it's as if there's a degradation and an attack on everything that people that believe in a multicultural, diverse, integrated world stand for. And it's actually taking away from the gains that we've made psychologically. It's very hard to come off a plantation, and I know the Freedmen's Bureau did all they could, but it's very hard to come off a plantation without a psychoeducational strategy, right? And we did that. So we kept walking, even though we were blind, we kept walking though we didn't understand. So when the dream appeared for us in the 60s, and it kept us through to 2018, it is vital that we keep dreaming and hold that vision, because right now it's probably the most important network and scaffolding that we have for what we want to put forward, both psychologically and spiritually.
But the brother also had another part of his question where he said, how can we engage young people and get them to forums like this? Does anyone want to speak specifically to that question, part of the question?
Again, I think that is difficult for the school system to do in some cases, but it's something that can happen in institutions like this, with the sororities, fraternities, and our community organizations, at the public libraries. This country was built on the fabric of diversity. It didn't happen with just white people. It never happened with just white people. So we need to go back to the basics of teaching our children on a regular basis what diversity is, how America is what it is because of the diverse history that it has. And go back to teaching them the basis of who they are and appreciation for other people. They need to learn how to celebrate difference until difference doesn't make a difference anymore. America is not what it is because of what we see on television. It's what we see that made America what it is. And we have to remind our children from the earliest age, not wait till they get in high school, at the earliest ages in preschool, that celebrate and enjoy each other. You go to a daycare center. They don't care what color you are. You want to play? I'm cool with you. Somewhere around the 4th or 5th grade, something happened. Something happened at home that they were taught how to hate. Love is natural. Hate is something you have to be taught how to do. So they were taught that. We have to undo that on a regular basis in our communities. Get people from different cultures together and see them learn about each other. What does it mean when you come from an Islamic faith? What does that mean? What does the attire mean? Why do you dress in African clothes? I get that all the time. Why do you do this? We don't know because we don't get the information. It's not good enough to celebrate food, dance, and culture. Everybody has good food. Everybody has some kind of rhythm, and we all have some kind of clothing that we wear. What about the undercurrent levels of diversity and culture that we don't learn? We need to learn about each other. The more knowledge we have, the more respect we have for each other.
Thank you. The next question will come actually from my Spelman sister and also a tenured professor at Hofstra Law School, Sister Keela Falami.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the organizers. And so my question, I guess in some ways may redirect the conversation in some, Dr. Banks in particular, but definitely I'm open to hearing what I think is seriously a concern. So I am at the law school, and what I notice with particularly our black law students is you can have the history. I do believe there's a problem in us not knowing our history. But even with the history, even with knowing our African American history and our culture and being proud, there seriously is a mental health crisis in the black community. And so, and I don't mean those with a diagnosis. I literally mean those walking around either in the law school, in the law firm, on the street, whatever it is, and to the point where it's a trigger, right? And so to operate under that level of stress, statistics, research shows it affects our health. We have an increase of Alzheimer's. We have a health, even an issue of crisis even among millennials, where it literally is eating away at us. And so with the law school, with the election of 45, I'm watching what our community, what we hold out as those, our creme de la creme, if you will. These are the lawyers who are moving forward. I'm watching them crumble in corners, walking around afraid and small and timid and not sure where to go and how to go and whether to say and where. What do we do about that, right? So I'm not sure if all of the history, if you will, gets to that. Because even in knowing my history, when that cop gets behind me, just to keep it real, there's a reaction, right? So there you go, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to hit it first and then we'll go around. So post-traumatic slave disorder is real. There's a couple of things that we've got to know. That's really real, right? So I've got researchers and historians jointly creating that term. And it wasn't just created because it was politically interesting. It was created because what you're speaking about is a stress disorder. And if you're an African American and you live in America, Harvard University has been doing a study since, that was my brother over there, in the 70s, came out of Harvard, and basically every year they have the same findings, right? That if you're black, in every disease category, whether it's a biological, physiological, or psychological area, you're going to be worse off. They get to the point where they were shouting about 10 years ago, like, how long do we, Harvard University, have to keep telling you that being black can be dangerous to your health, right? So you already have that data. And then on top of that, we are not paying attention to all the sociological and environmental factors that make us isolate. So intense fear makes us isolate sometimes. So you'll have huge, amazing brains not being able to move. I've heard our candidates and our elected officials talk about 1 a.m. in the morning, and these are black women elected officials, being in Albany and being down in D.C., and still having the same issues around anxiety and depression because they know what they have to face in the morning, right? They have a battle. So one of the things we cannot allow ourselves to forget is every time you encounter yourself first in the mirror and anyone of African descent living in a society like ours with the silent aggressions and the macroaggressions, they're going to get frayed. And we do know two things. We know we want to help them, help ourselves first. That you have to have three things, and Dr. Linda Pruitt told me this, a phenomenal psychologist. If you're black, you need to have a therapist. Now, I'm not trying to endorse myself, and I do have an office on 224th and Linden, but I'm trying to tell you that if you are getting up every morning, taking on the challenges of this world, you need backup. And I support being in a community of practice. So being in Delta Sigma Theta sorority, I have my sisters, and I can go to them anytime in a huddle and talk. We have the pre-meeting, the post-meeting, the on the phone. Those are real groups of therapy. We're actually working out our issues. We must continue to do that. So you must get anyone you see in that law school, or you in a community of practice. And then you need to have a spiritual director, because we are spiritual people. So if you are out of community with your God, you are in trouble. You cannot last that way. You must have a practice that centers your breathing, your mind, your spirit, your food. This is a holy temple. So once you have your therapist And once you have your spiritual advisor, then the next person you have to have is a relationship with yourself. Lose all the titles, lose all the pressure. Just show up and know that you have made, by an act of showing up, you have started your own revolution.
Wow, wow, wow. We have time for 2 more questions. We'll take your question, and Frank Joseph, you'll be the last one.
Okay, good afternoon. I'd pose this question to Dr. Banks and anyone else who wants to weigh in. Does racism qualify as a mental illness? And if so, should it not be addressed, mandated for treatment? And I ask that question particularly in light of your comments prior to that we are sustaining unabiding racism. That is, we're like shock absorbers to it. Can we fend it off by having it declared as such?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association say no. And the Association of Black Psychologists say yes. So we've been in this dance for a long time. And by that I mean that while every indication that racism in and of itself is not what's causing the disorder, right? Because we all have, they say, biases and prejudices. It's when it turns into a direct and hateful act where your group is superior and my group is not, is where we start to have that reactive tension around racism, and we hold views from the stereotype as if they're true. It starts to fester, these stories we tell ourselves, and we make ourselves sick, and then in kind make the other. We haven't been able to deem racism in and of itself as a mental disorder. But we have been able to say that any indication of the projection of that racism now becomes something that you're acting on, right? You can be an inward racist sitting around quiet, I don't know, and I can tell that your silence can sometimes be obtrusive, but if you start to act on that and it becomes a hate crime, right, or it becomes something that I sense and know and puts me in a fear and threat, then we actually have that among our diagnosable categories for some abilities or disabilities in our lexicon for psychologists. That means that we have ways of understanding, going back to P45, and I can say this because the American Psychological Association put out a letter saying that they thought he was not fit to hold office. It was the first time my association said that because of his narcissism. And his extreme narcissism, which we think is against his ability to carry out his duties. So to a short answer, if racism is impacting the person's ability to carry out their duties as a human being, fair, right, and non-discriminate, then, and indeed, we can bring it up as some kind of mental distress. But we can't say because you're a racist, you now have a mental disorder, and this is the treatment for it. I hope we can move in that direction.
Thank you, Dr. Banks. Ms. Clark?
Okay, everybody, I just wanted to let you know what we're going through right now every time we go to court. And it's like James Jackson, okay, he's a racist and whatnot. And he wrote in a journal what his plans were. And he did what he said he was going to do, but now he's trying to play the insanity role, you know. The DA said that hopefully that's not going to fly. You know, he can't say, oh, you got the wrong person. That wasn't me. I'm mentally ill. But, you know, she says that that's just not going to fly. So, you know, it's unfortunate that taxpayers' money is being wasted. They just need to go ahead, throw them in the box, and throw away the key.
Thank you. And our final question for this portion of the program, Frank Joseph.
Awesome. It's not a question, but I'd like to thank Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated for inviting for this panel, for this discussion, but also for inviting my agency, the New York City Commission on Human Rights, just to share some information with you. My name is Frank Joseph, and I'm the managing director at the New York City Commission on Human Rights. And one thing that we do is we combat discrimination And our guidance is the New York City human rights law, and we work with the NYPD, where oftentimes the NYPD will share with us, the hate crimes, reports, and we will go and we'll also conduct our own investigations, because there are things that NYPD will do from a criminality standpoint, and there are things that we can do from a civil standpoint. Now, the bar for something to be a hate crime is also something that is pretty high as well, but under the New York City human rights law, there's something called discriminatory harassment. So when we were watching that video, you saw that there was a lady in front of a counter and she was telling another person to go home. For us, that's discrimination on the basis of immigration or nation of origin. That's something that you could come to the commission on, and we have attorneys that will come, that will conduct an investigation, and will represent you in civil court. I always like telling people, for free, because we're already paid through your taxpayer dollars, and we will make sure that if we can find that, yes, there was discrimination, there are penalties that person can face, and sometimes the people who were the victims of discrimination can also get, some monetary, reward, not reward, but can get some monetary compensation as well for what they faced. Just like in housing, for example, if we have a housing provider, a landlord in Bushwick, who just told the tenants that they need to get out or they'll call ICE. That's something right now that we're investigating. In Queens, in northern Queens actually, one thing that we did is there was a landlord that just received a $250,000 penalty because of some of the bias remarks and biased acts that they were committing. So us at the New York City Commission on Human Rights, we are a resource, and post-election we have launched something called the Bias Response Team. And we're actually hiring discriminatory harassment investigators to come, be part of our unit, and go and investigate some of these cases and these claims to make sure that people, no matter what your immigration status is, your race, no matter what your religion is, that you understand you are protected, and that we don't just educate people on their protections, but there's action behind it. We've seen in the last couple of years a 72% increase in discrimination on the basis of religion. We've seen an over 80% increase on discrimination based on race. And we've seen it double when it comes to immigration. And so these are just some of the protected categories that we have, and we want to make sure that you know we are a resource. You can get my information after the program, or you can also speak to the Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated, Sorority Incorporated, to get our information so that we can make sure that we're helping you out. And thank you to the pastor of this house, Reverend Lowe, for opening up his doors.
Thank you so very much, and Pastor Lowe, again, thank you for allowing us to have this space. I mean, what we've heard from the panel today, we can walk away and saying, well, we just didn't hear speeches, but we heard some action plan. Matter of fact, I have to get a therapist right away. But again, we want to thank the wonderful Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated for having a vision and for standing on what's right and putting together such a phenomenal program. And Rosalind, we know you and your team, those 12 o'clock calls, thank God, no more. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you for hosting this event. And we're going to move into the next portion of our program. I'd like to bring the co-chair of the Social Action Committee, Sister Mindy Weeks. Sister Mindy Weeks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, like Jacques said, we'd like to thank you all for coming out today. We'd like to thank this wonderful panel. There's a wealth of knowledge up here. There's a wealth of knowledge out here as well. And to really get down to what we all really want, it would take all day. It seriously would, with all the knowledge that sits before us. So let's thank them again. Let's thank Pastor Lowe and Mount Moriah for co-chair, for doing this with us and allowing us in this space to have such great discussions. So in your package, there are evaluations. Okay, so please take out the evaluations, because the only way we can do better is to know what you got from this, what you would like to get from future endeavors that we have with Mount Moriah. So if you would please fill them out. After you fill them out, and only if you fill them out, are we going to allow you to go downstairs for refreshments. If not, you have to sit right up here. Let me introduce my soror, Denise Johnson White, Esquire, who's going to bring you some information on the letter we're trying to have you all fill out.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denise Johnson White. I am a very proud member of the Queens Alumni Chapter, and I also have the honor of serving as the Eastern Region Social Action Coordinator for our sorority. Today, we have a letter, and as we say, it is because we are about social action. We are not about social grumbling, social complaining, social sitting back with your friends and just being mad about it. We are about action. So we have a letter here that we are addressing the resident of the White House, and we are sending him some of our concerns. Congressman Meeks gave a few words about how we have something called Delta Days in the nation's capital, and it is where Deltas from all over the country and certain parts of the world come to Washington, D.C. And one of the things that they always tell us is that people tend to talk to the politicians who they think are on their side. So that's why people talk to Congressman Meeks in the barbershop. We always talk to Assemblywoman Hydeman every time we see her at sorority meetings. But we don't tend to talk to those who we think oppose us. And that's what they're counting on. So we ask you today to fill out this letter where we address Mr. Trump and we tell him, we see you, we are unhappy with you, and you have to listen to us as American citizens. Additionally, the defamatory comments that he made about immigrants from El Salvador, Haiti, and some African nations are completely unacceptable. We demand an apology. So, in case you didn't fill it out yet, please put your name on the top, your address on the second and third line. We are not trying to compile any information about you. We just need this information because when it goes to the White House, they're going to clock in, yes, you are a resident of Queens County. And they do keep record of who is talking back. And we want to be among the communities that are counted as speaking up for ourselves. So we thank you today. And if you fill out the letter, please give it to one of the lovely ladies in the back. We also have some extras. You could bring it home with you and have residents of your household fill it out and mail it to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue directly. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, everyone. Last but not least, I'm sorry, I wanted to thank our moderator, Jacques. This is not just a man of Omega Psi Phi. This is a man of the community, of the Queens community, who gets out there and does his thing in any way with the children, with the grown-ups, with anybody. You call on him, and he's right there. If you don't know him, he's a brother to know. Thank you, guys.
Excuse me, it's just one more thing I want to say that's important that we forgot about the signatures. You know, if you put your address or telephone number, we'll be contacting you. We would like for everybody to come to court the day of the sentence, just to show love, you know, show the court that Timothy was loved from his community.
What's the date?
We don't have the court date. That's what I say.
The 17th. This Wednesday, I'm sorry. 17th of January. No. Yeah, 100 Center Street.
No. I'm saying, is that the sentencing date?
Oh, no, not yet. Yeah.
Right, I would definitely ask that you
date of the sentence.
Yeah.
That would be important.
Can you need the microphone?
On behalf of Delta Sigma Theta Queens Alumni Chapter, we have a small token of appreciation for our panel. Thank you.
Okay.
everyone's information, this Saturday, the second Women's March, is from 11 to 3 at 72nd and Central Park West. Tell everybody. Now I know who 45 was. I thought you were talking about 1945. I never knew. I'm a poet. I'm an activist. I wrote a poem about the last one I will tell you. I won't use my fist. I'm an activist. I'm using my voice. That is my choice. I hope someday we can rejoice when good news comes our way. I march for what I believe. I'm entitled to receive. That'll give us a reprieve. That's what we're trying to achieve. So everybody be at the next Women's March. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Ayana Smash. I'm 18 years old, and I have the privilege of singing for you today. The song that I've chosen is a song that is very close to my heart. It was written for the Selma movie that was made about the beautiful person that is, or that was, Martin Luther King Jr. And it was written by Common and John Legend, and I hope that you like it. One day, when the glory comes, it'll be us, it'll be us. Whoa, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Whoa, glory. Whoa. Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against. Yes, glory is destined. Every day women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is the rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it goes down, we women and men up. They say stand down and we stand up. Shots, we on the ground. The camera pans up. King pointed to the mountaintop and we ran up. So one day, when the glory comes, it'll be us. It'll be us. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory. Oh, yeah. Now the war isn't over and victory is won. And so we'll fight on to the finish. And then when it's all done, we'll cry glory. Oh, glory. Oh. We'll cry glory. Oh, Selma is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, power is the people. Enemy is legal, a ring became regal. Solid face of Jim Crow under a bald eagle. Our biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing. Our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. And now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win a war individually. It takes the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord. My eyes have seen the glory. So one day, when the glory comes, it'll be us. It'll
Glory.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And this concludes our program. Thank you. We have refreshments in the basement. Please help yourself. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hi, can we have the panelists, members of Social Action Committee, panelists, and oh, before I let everyone go, I just want to thank Detective Cooper. If you don't know Detective Cooper, I don't know where you've been in Queens, but I just want to thank you. She was able to get the NYPD to come and assist our panel. Thank you. Thank you, sweetheart. Social Action Committee and panel, please, to the front of the room. James McCrae, when you're available, to the front of the room.